Commander Dolam stood at ease at the observation display on the command deck of Raum Station. He stood, sipping a steaming cup of coffee as he surveyed the world before him. Here, in high orbit about Harlos, he marveled at man's creation, a near-perfect world that was a larder and breadbasket that sustained 100 million souls across the diaspora. He could see the glinting of the urban centers of glass and metal that towered over the gentle cream and tan beige hues of the landscape. It was a miracle made manifest by the ingenuity of humanity, and he was proud to play his critical part in realizing the bounty of the world. As he admired the planet, his gaze caught a subtle flare of green energy ripple across his view, a glimpse of an energized field that permeated lower orbit. That was the effects of the geo-constellation satellites, and within minutes, the anchoring station of the constellation, Uberwachen Station, came into view. Slightly smaller than his own pod-launch manifold station, Uberwachen was far more technologically advanced. It was characterized by the torrid shape that was common among orbit stations. However, unlike other major orbit facilities across the diaspora, the station was surrounded by a vast array of energized filled panels and dishes, giving the station the appearance of a garden of stunning iridescent flowers perpetually in bloom. Dolam imagined his compatriot, Commander Trina, was also at that moment enjoying his morning coffee, gazing up at Raum Station with similar feelings of pride. Dolam silently toasted his brother-at-arms, a small gesture of solidarity between commanders, even if the other would never know. Dolam's reverie was broken by the approach of his exo, a bright and talented young woman called Serafina. She was only 10 years younger than Dolam's 55, but she wore her age much better than he did. Her shoulder-length brown hair framing the smooth olive skin of her face and draping down to brush against the shoulders of her crisp command uniform, adorned with commendation pins. "Commander," Serafina said, assuming a position by Dolam's side to join him in the view. They both stood for a few extra moments, absorbing the view before the blaring of alarms and warnings heaved the burden of command upon them both once again. Dolam looked at Serafina and rolled his eyes. "Let's see what this is about then," he declared nonchalantly, and the two of them began to meander towards the increasingly frantic command deck. As the door slid open, a seemingly sourceless voice from the far side of the room's expansive command deck heralded their arrival. "Commander on deck!" All assembled, some 30 personnel, stood briefly to acknowledge Dolam and Serafina's presence before they returned their focus to the screens before them. "Status," Dolam said, walking to the center of the deck to take a seat, directing his query to the new sensors operative on the console to his left. "Raiders, sir," the operative responded, before assuming control of the primary display and projecting a live feed of the incoming threat. Within moments, they saw the raiders in all their glory, or lack thereof. Assembled was a collection of what looked like 6 commandeered autonomous transport pods, haphazardly retrofitted from their disjointed and chaotic appearance. The operative continued. "Telemetry has them jumping in from the Anira zone, likely beyond Pyron." Dolam sighed and rubbed his face in resigned frustration. "Where are they heading?" The leeward deposit, sir." Dolam turned to his exo with an almost bored expression on his face. Raiders, particularly from impoverished settlements in the Anira zone, or beyond the Cernius Passage near Merzadon, were an infrequent annoyance. Dolam knew starvation, deprivation, and desperation was rampant across the diaspora, particularly in the more inhospitable worlds and moons of the vast expanses. But few ever grew desperate enough to raid and pillage the grain storage depots in high orbit of Harlos. He would never understand why, even when faced with the misery of existence, why anyone would ever take the risk, knowing that the outcome was all but certain. "Operative, please tag and issue orders to the Coalition Patrol to engage with extreme prejudice," Dolam declared, his subdued monotone conveying none of the gravity of his order. "Sir, several of the vessels are claiming by refugees, saying they have women and children on board," the operative stated, turning to the commander, the audio now playing openly across the bridge. "I can hear a lot of commotion in the transmission, multiple voices crying and screaming. Do I belay the order to the patrol? No, Dolam responded, frustrated at the operative's presumption. It's a common ruse, and even if it's true, the responsibility for the souls aboard on those ships rests with the reckless captains. Board policy is clear. There is no mercy for those that threaten the breadbasket of the diaspora. The display before the command deck showed 3 sleek-looking silver and blue vessels, coalition mercenaries that were contracted for anti-piracy patrols, making directly for the approaching pirates. Within moments, the vast distances of space were closed, and soon several hull-mounted railguns opened fire on the comparatively slow and bulbous pods. Flashes of red and white light signaled the strike of the hyper-accelerated projectiles before the retrofitted pods of the raiders, one by one, began to explode. The frantic audio of the raiders' desperate pleas that had echoed across the commander's deck quickly abated as, one by one, the cacophony of desperate screams were utterly extinguished. It was less than 2 minutes since the arrival of the raiders, and all that was left of them was the broken hulls of their ill-fated scatterpods, slowly tumbling down towards the thick atmosphere of Harlos. As a moment of silence gripped the commander's deck before the comms operative finally spoke, sensors confirmed 122 souls on board, including 41 children. The operative looked over at the command, their expression breaking slightly at the reality of what had just transpired. Dolam looked over at his exo, with Serafina nodding back to him, reassuring him of the justice of his decision. Collateral damage,